What's up, guys? This is Jay and Scott from Revolution Radio. We're here just quickly to cover some of the news that's happened the last few days. Scott, how's life treating you, my friend?
Well, nobody's sick, nobody's dying. At least here at this household, I'm sure there are people outside of my door, who aren't doing so well. But hey, I'm probably a few pounds fatter, and still enjoying the fruits of some of the final pies and stuff from Thanksgiving. But
Oh,
other than that, good.
you should be careful, man. It's almost at the seventh day. That's when it starts to turn. I think you actually really only have like 4 days for turkey, 4 to 5 before it starts getting like shaky for your digestive system.
Well, we already turned the ham into ham and beans, and that's gone. But
Okay,
we
all
don't
right.
have any of those kind of, consumable stuff. But there's still like frozen stuff that we, didn't bust out that we're kind of, like I got a peach pie coming real soon.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, nothing that can actually kill you. Yeah, typically we do the show Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday night, my Seahawks played, and yeah, sorry, I gotta watch my Seahawks, and especially because we live in Kansas, I get to see them maybe 3 or 4 times a year, and especially Monday, we played the Eagles, trashed the Eagles. It was actually kind of a boring game, but you know, I'll take it. I have to enjoy that. So that was where I was at Monday. Um, and so I'm glad to be back doing this today with you. So I want to start on maybe something that's probably a little boring, a little out there, but it does bother me, and I kind of make a note to talk about these. Number one, because I've had certain people make comments about me being a leftist and being on the left. I want to point out I'm not a socialist or a communist, and I'm definitely not a neo-lib. And I think one of the main things that when we're doing this, when I was doing this by myself or in radio or with Scott or wherever it might be, for the last 4 years has been bashing Trump in a lot of ways. And so now I'm already showing the the turning of the corner, so to speak. And so every time Biden makes an appointee, I want to talk about this person. I want to talk about why I'm not a fan, why they're a dangerous person, and why this is a horrible move for America, as well as the Biden administration. I have to talk no more than to just say the word near a tandem to explain my issue with this one. and I, I I don't know if you know much about near tandem.
I, to tell you the truth, I'm not even familiar with the name, but I
Really?
should be.
Okay, well, so Neera Tanden, she's been involved in government for, I mean, probably a decade or better. Right now, she's the president of Think Progress, I believe, is the title or her job.
Got a
Um,
political action group.
yes, um, they're so yeah. Sorry, not Think Progress. She is currently the CEO of the Center for American Progress. My bad. Um, yeah, and they're good and bad. There's some people that work in that firm in that group. I don't even know what if you'd be fair to call it a firm, because there are people like Bernie Sanders' campaign manager, Faz Shakir, who's a very credible dude. But then there's also yeah, like Neera Tanden. The reason why I think the Faz Shakir and Neera Tanden, you know, verses comes up is because there's multiple stories. One in which Neera Tanden punched Faj Zakir because he was given the ability to interview Hillary Clinton, and he asked her about her support of the Iraq War. And Neera did
Oh,
not like
how
this.
dare he?
Yeah, exactly. So she notably punched him. She also had sent Faz Shakir an email. And this email, I think this really breaks down exactly who she is. This was one of those WikiLeaks interview leaks that came out and like really showed a lot of the corruption and the just how despicable the neo-libs are. And Neera Tanden had actually written this email to Faz Shakir when Faz had said, I don't think that we should be charging third world companies for bombing them. And what he was talking about was that Neera Tanden's idea was simply stated this: we have a mass debt, Libya has oil. And that's who they are. And this is why this pick of Neera Tanden for the budget office is it's disturbing because obviously we have a kind of a peek behind the curtain to see who she is. What's her answer? Not to mention she was also a person who was a big fan of the grand bargain, the cutting of Social Security, the cutting of Medicare, all to help with the deficit. And, by the way, obviously it's apparent that she's fine with starting wars if she thinks they're going to be beneficial.
or profitable.
And yeah, well, beneficial, profitable. And, I think the biggest slap in the face, by the way, and I'm not sure how you take this from Biden and his team, but they actually threw it out that, oh, this is a gift to the AOC party, the AOC wing of the group, because Neera Tanden, is a ethnic woman. And if you're not on Twitter, you're not on left-wing Twitter, Neera Tanden and the left fight more than Trump supporters in the left wing fight. And I mean, Biden has classically said, I don't care what happens on Twitter. What happens in Twitter isn't real life, and that's not how I'm going to govern. And he's definitely making a statement by saying, hey, AOC, here's one of your people. Be happy, even though this is exactly the opposite of what the left wants. But I had to just break down exactly who Neera Tanden is, and as this you know, Biden's coalition continues to grow around these same people. And by the way, I want to also be clear on another thing. We had talked about in one of the last shows, we talked about Tony Blinken and how perverse and corrupt and insiderish he is. And we talked about the firm that he ran with Michelle Flournoy. Well, Neera Tanden was also part of that firm. And here's the big one that kind of comes out is that Neera Tanden is also part of this latest firm that has kind of come up. We found out more about it. It potentially had actually went up after the election, called Pine Island. And in Pine Island was a bunch of neo-libs. And the whole marketing of Pine Island was this. It was, we have a way to make your investments grow. We have an unorthodox manner of getting your message to important people. And lo and behold, every single one of the people who's a part of this firm, who you dump your money into to gain influence, they're somebody who's connected with Biden. Like, this has to be illegal. It's completely legal, by the way, but I'm saying morally, ethically, from the stance of trying to run a government, this cannot be legal. You can't say, look, we're about and me or one of my associates, we're going to gain that power. So give us money now, and we'll make sure to govern the way that you want us to. I mean, how far away from that really is that from bribing?
Yeah, I mean it is bribing. I mean we should always expect more from these people, but we're almost too used to it at this point.
I think so, but I think we put up with it, and nobody says, I mean, here's a classic thing, and I hate to throw it back into Trump's face, but Trump had 4 years, and if he had proposed getting money out of politics, I think every politician, not every, but 95% of them would have been against it, but the public support would have been overwhelming. And he could have pushed on something. He could have made something happen because that was one of the things he ran on. I'm going to drain the swamp. How else do you drain the swamp than to take the money out of it? And this is something he could have put an executive order in to make it illegal for this. He could have even done, I mean, what Obama did was like kid gloves, but he still said, hey, if you're a working politician, you can't quit and then join a lobbyist firm for 10 years. That at least put a hurdle. It showed that he was trying. Now, granted, many are going to point out, yeah, but he put a bunch of loopholes in it that you could actually be an advisory to that lobbyist firm. And yes, you can't. There's workarounds, but he still at least put a foot forward. Last administration did nothing on it, and this is exactly what we get. And I think it's just important to point out that this is who Biden's cabinet is. This is why Wall Street was for him. This is why big tech was for him, because they all know that they have a direct access to the influencers in his party, and it's called K Street. It's right there. Dump your money off, get your message, get your bill passed. It's sad. I don't know. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that.
Well, even more so than you just get your bill passed. I mean, these people literally write legislation for some of these politicians to submit, and some of these things get completely passed and paid for and built. Regardless of. I've directly witnessed politicians being asked about a particular bill that went through, and they were unaware of the name of the bill, what it contained, and how much it cost, and they were asked, well, what do you mean? This is your bill. It has your name on it. How could you not know what's in it? And they're like, well, I don't have time to talk right now. I mean, it's a absolute pass through. And they don't even know what, they're being paid for this.
I think a good example of that would have been the COVID relief bills. Many of these corporations and these lobbyist firms actually wrote bills, handed them to certain politicians, and was like, okay, you need to pass this. And yeah, they would just sign off on it. I mean, they don't even write legislation anymore. K Street does, because K Street has enough former politicians that know how to do it. You're totally right. In fact, there was a pretty much a famous quote that came out this summer when we were talking about stimulus package, and a K Street lobbyist openly said, "Politics doesn't happen without us, so we better get funded." And they're
Right,
right.
right.
They're right, by the way. We would have no legislation whatsoever.
And speaking of some of those, there have been, and now I'm all for some of the restrictions associated with COVID, especially large gatherings and stuff. But in a few of the lockdown scenarios where they were letting basically corporate businesses stay open,
Right.
and we're talking about the same kind of businesses, whether it be a McDonald's or a big box store, they were individual businesses like in Canada they had a big kerfuffle recently in the last week over a barbecue place that serves large
You
part
talked
of
about
the
this last time.
yeah, and of course that man was arrested and everything else, and they were quick to point out, well, how can this be if these other businesses that serve the same people, and there's no more or less threat with ours, and we're willing to follow the rules when it came to dining and spacing and all the other things in delivery, and yet we have to shut down and they don't.
A good
And come to
example.
find out, a couple of the governors and mayors, basically, they hadn't even set a decree or made any legislation associated with it. Apparently, it was just on the suggestion of the local advisor from the CDC or from the COVID staff, or it was just like, well, we should do this. It's almost like they didn't check to see if that was fair for the people or not. It didn't matter about the safety of it. They were just, and you got to wonder where their motivation's coming from. If they don't have to answer to anybody, they have a direct line to the governor, to the mayor, to enforce law. In other words, the police are enforcing it, but it's not law. In fact, it's not even a written piece of paper.
Right.
It's just someone's opinion.
Or you could go even further. I would say like a better example, and it actually is here in America, just like New York State was a good example where, when the outbreak started, and it's coming back where they're starting to do localized lockdowns. Small businesses are encouraged, and were actually ordered to shut down. But meanwhile, like Walmart, Target, Saks Fifth Avenue, places like that, they ended up shutting down. A lot of them did. Walmart didn't. Target didn't. A lot of them didn't. They stayed open as they were they
Essentials.
essentials. Yet you did have a lot of bodegas who were forced to shut down. I would argue if you live in New York City, a bodega is far more essential to you than a Walmart that you'll
Absolutely.
probably never see.
Absolutely.
But yeah. So that obviously was happening. But I think every single corporation, this is why, in some ways, the idea of being a capitalist makes me sick because this is why they are who they are. This is how they get so much power. This is how they have so much, is that they take a situation. They saw COVID happen. Someone like Jeff Bezos saw COVID and was like,
Oh yeah, Bezos.
I know how to make money off this. They don't care about anything else. And we reward them with a great life, all the money they want, all the power they want, and we say,
All
hey,
the tax credits.
yeah, and then we rejoice in the system that gave them that, and we say, yeah, we're capitalists, we're pure capitalists, but then we hate them at the same time. You have to choose, by the way. You can't say, hey,
Yeah.
I'm I'm a capitalist, but I don't like the scum in DC. I don't like the well, that's what
Yeah,
capitalism
they say
did.
they're a pure capitalist until the extreme parts of capitalism come through as being damaging and dirty. Just like you just have to cull some of these companies back when they start to do damage instead of bolster them, and that's all we've done is
And
bolster them,
and let's be clear too,
bail them
it's
out.
it's not even that extreme. I mean, small towns like this, we definitely have that kind of corruption. I mean, we have um, rich um, small business would be tip because we live in a small town, but the bigger businesses in this town, they control a lot of the laws that happen in this town. They control what contracts they get. They control a lot of stuff that you wouldn't think they do. I mean, it's that's part of capitalism, unfortunately. But anyway, I don't want to jump on that. I do want to say, talking about lockdowns, California did usher in some new
Oh,
lockdowns.
Gavin. Oh, Gavin.
But you know what? I want to give Gavin Newsom a little bit of credit because he's done something that our entire country hasn't done. And he also rolled out a stimulus package, giving 25 billion with a B as available credit for the state. 5 billion is already being used. In that is $25,000 or $250,000 for small businesses to grant loans right off the bat so they can get through this. You have thousands and $100,000 going into certain cities for like resource management and things like that. There's a pretty detailed plan, and as much as I wanted to trash Gavin Newsom and this whole idea of what he's doing, I actually got to give him credit because he's doing something that no one else is doing. Um, so there
Yeah,
is that.
the only place is Gavin has a lot of bad optics, and he goes and does the $100 a plate meals
Oh
and
yes, of course, of course.
$200 bottles of wine when he's telling other people not to leave their homes or to, not to after he puts in a curfew, or if it, it's kind of like, you know what? Optics look. It's like when Nancy Pelosi tried to blame the haircut stylist for, for her going and not having a mask on and getting presidential treatment, and then, being upset.
I
It,
agree. The only thing I will say though with Gavin is that he's the only person in power who was able to say, I don't care. We're putting out a stimulus. I'm not letting small businesses fail. Like it or not, every other person in power in this country is letting small businesses fail, letting families fail. Gavin Newsom's the only one that had the stones to actually put up a stimulus plan and pass it, by the way. It's an active bill now in the state of California.
Yeah,
I
and
read,
I'd say that is a good thing, but California has
Texas is,
is it?
well, I was gonna say
Go
Texas
ahead.
just employed, more National Guardsmen to come and help them move dead bodies. I,
Yeah,
and
and
they're
Texas
wide
is
open.
sitting on a lot of money too, which they haven't. Unemployment funds and stimulus money that they apparently are having a hard time letting go of and giving to people.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's part of the issue. But anyway, moving on. Another interesting piece of news that we found out today, and I think some of us were kind of, I don't know, I'm gonna say in the know, but have known about it. Um, Ivanka Trump was deposed. She was being questioned by Washington's AG about campaign finance law. Um, there's many allegations against the Trump campaign, some which involve her directly, some involving her getting money. We've talked about this. I think the big one is in the Southern District of New York. Now this one has nothing to do with this one. That one has a lot with her receiving money as an advisor, um, which, by the way, is just the most ridiculous thing I can think of. You can't pay your children and your wife as an advisor. That's money in your own household, whatever. Um, and many of the allegations that are coming out of this one that we just saw that she was deposed in is today, um, did have to deal with her direct payments that she got from the campaign, achieving part of her $80 million, I don't know if you want to call it a salary that she had received for the year of 2019, and not just from campaign. It's not just from campaign, so don't. But it was part of the $80 million that she made last year was campaign funds, and some of that's questionable. A lot of the things that is questionable on that is that the fact that she received higher than any other campaign manager, and not just by a little bit. We're talking by multiples. And by the way, she was never a campaign manager. She was an advisor, quote unquote. And this is how that's the Trump grift, by the way. Is my family is going to be advisors, and I'm going to pay them tons of money. A lot of families, we just call that being family, and you know they help you along the way. But I have seen other allegations in this, and I'm going to say about 65 to 70% of this is legit, and it looks like it could be serious. 25 to 30% of it, though, you have some real questionable stuff that I think that you could get any campaign on, and most of them are doing it, and I don't like the look of it. So here's the thing that I want to ask you about, and then I'll comment on it as well. But number one, the big conversation is can Trump pre-pardon his children? And number two, and this one kind of being, you know, one of the bigger ones, but should we actually be going after Trump in these kind of, you know, um, campaign finance violations and things of that nature?
Well, I would say that he's definitely on the hook for it, uh, and I think that there's definitely something to be looked at there. But I think we need to start back up the line if we're going to start doing this. In other words, let's go back at least two administrations because these things have been going on and been unanswered uh, because of each administration quashing each other's investigations. Let's do a let's start back up the line and then when we get to them we'll get to them. But we have a lot of other people who are very, very guilty of the same things and we shouldn't jump. In other words, if the court system is full, you can't just jump ahead. You have to wait your turn. And I think the last two administrations, probably even farther back, but the most relevant administrations that are still around should probably answer in some way or form.
And what do you think about him pre-pardoning his children?
Yeah, I think I don't think anybody's ever done that, have they?
No.
Well, and I don't know about the
Also, I mean,
nepotism directly involved, but
he
I
also
don't know if that's legal. Is it legal? I mean, that's the real question.
that's been the question. And if it is legal, how do you feel about it?
If it is legal, he can do it. But if he does it, that's going to be really bad optics right off the bat. That's worse than the Fifth Amendment. That's even before you've been directly accused of something specific. So if he does that, I think it would ruin his 2024 campaign.
Yeah, without a doubt. No, I mean, so my thoughts on it, I'll start where you left off there, and that is like number one, I don't know if you can pre-pardon somebody for a crime that hasn't been determined. Like you were saying, that has been the talking point. MSNBC has been going crazy over this, and they're like, "Oh, he's gonna do it. He's gonna do it." But I don't even know how you would write that up. Like, I want to pre-pardon
Well,
my
as a
kids.
talking point, it almost seems kind of funny that they're doing a hypothetical on a hypothetical.
Right. No, exactly, exactly. But this has caught wind, and he did say something. In passing, he asked AG Barr about pardoning himself, and so that's where this all comes from.
Yeah,
Was it a
I think he's
dumb
just
like Donald
tired and
Trump
angry,
question?
and
But and when I say dumb Donald Trump, I don't mean like I just mean like a dumb everyman question. Like, did he ask him about this like I don't know during the summer just to be like, hey, so I know I can do some pardons because we're talking about that right now. Could I pardon
yeah, he did.
myself?
He did some
Like
great pardons too. He did some really good ones this year,
I don't know if it's a great, but a lot of corporate douchebags, a ton of them. Um,
and a lot of people who were wrongly put in prison.
well, that was like last year.
Oh, well,
No,
okay. I'm just
this
saying some of them were okay,
some of them
but
were okay. A lot of them were corporate scum. But no, so I don't know if he can or not. If he does, I think it's ridiculous. I, I think this is where Trump, and this is gonna lead me into the whole thing about us going after him. And when I say us, of course, I mean the government. Um, he speaks too loud. He he says the stuff that people don't. He has the whole Eminem syndrome. He says the things only people talk about with their friends. But that gets you into trouble as well. And this is one
yeah,
of those
he
situations
doesn't
where it
think a lot of
could.
times before he speaks. That's for sure. Twitter's a good Twitter is proof of that.
Exactly, because what does that set the precedent? As you said, and you were a Trump supporter. You were like, yeah, if he did this, it doesn't look good. And yeah, no, it doesn't look good at all. I don't think he's gonna do it because I just don't legally know how you would do it. You'd say, hey, there's a crime that might come up. That crime is, I don't know exactly what you're gonna call it, but I want to pardon my child from it. I don't know how you legally make that stick. On the other hand, when we talk about, you know, digging into campaign fraud, and even in the Southern District of New York where they're going after him, I think that one's difficult because I think the Southern District of New York has been going after Trump since before he even ran for presidency. Do you remember when he ran for presidency and there was the tax papers? Hey, we need to see the taxes. We need to see the taxes, and he was like, "No, I can't. They're being audited." That was part of it. I fear that people won't recognize that and won't remember that he's already been in hot water before he was the president. The reason why I say that is and not to mention his own rhetoric has been lock her up, lock him up, lock everyone up that I don't like. I hate that though. I hate that narrative. We see that in third world countries. We see that in these banana republics, and that's why you have these dictatorships. Is because people want to cling to power. Because to get to power, you have to be a criminal, and and if you lose that power, you're going to prison or you're dead, and that's what creates these things. And so I don't, yet on the other hand, do I think Obama should be tried for, war crimes? Yeah, I do. Do I think the Bush administration should be tried uh, for terrorism in their own right?
For treason. For
Tre-
treason, basically.
treason, yes, and um, doing the thing they weren't supposed to do in Guantanamo Bay, and I can't think of the word. um, what were they doing down there?
Well, that would definitely be war crimes if you're talking about torture and stuff like that against
Torture
them.
was the word. But yeah, I mean, all of those things. I would love to see those administrations be brought up on trial for that stuff.
But what you're asking for is the lesser of two or the lesser of so many. It's like criminals prosecuting criminals, and regardless of what you think of our justice system, yes, that's pretty much how it works right now anyway.
Right, right.
But I mean, it's kind of like who's the newest criminal to prosecute the old criminals? It's like reminds me of the Philippines, and and what's his name? Anyway, the leader of the Philippines, he's like, we're going to stop the drug dealers, and by the way, I'm going to kill them all.
Right, right.
There's Duarte. He's like, I'm just gonna go kill them. There's no trial. There's no
No,
capture.
just going out killing.
Yeah, and anybody caught with drugs, you're dead. It's like, oh God,
And
that may be a little harsh.
did we find out too that like low key somewhere in the back door, a lot of the money he got for that campaign was from drugs?
Yeah, oh, I'm sure. I mean, it just reminds me of a lot of Mexico and how
Yeah, that's old
it's been
Mexico.
so every good politician to start in Mexico is instantly killed. Mayors, governors, they get elected and they say we're going to fight the cartels. Boom, they're dead.
Right, right. But again, that was old Mexico. New Mexico's kicking some ass. I'll be honest. I've always thought like, where am I going? Am I going to Canada or Mexico? And it's always been Canada, but it has really been favoring Mexico the last couple years. Mexico's doing some stuff. I'll be honest. I mean,
Well,
there's
and
some good
I'll
stuff
I'll
going
be
on.
honest. If Mexico didn't have, if Mexico, because the scariest part of Mexico is the cartels, people stopped visiting, and as much as they were the tourism years ago, and so they just started abducting regular citizens, and that shows that they were definitely in a state of desperation. But I would love to see Mexico get really cleaned up because you just don't hear about the same kind of silliness in Mexico. People are down to earth in Mexico. They're
Well,
not
one of the things that
Canada.
has really changed has been their new president, and he's a populist left. And what did he do? He basically brought manufacturing back, so people now have like pretty decent jobs, and they're not forced to work for the cartel. So they're like, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna sell drugs. I'd rather make a TV and make more money. A lot of people don't know. A lot of our TVs come from down there, and car. They just inked a deal with Ford, I believe, and I know they did with Toyota. But that's actually helping. Not the point. The point is yeah, I think we would create a banana republic if we went after every politician who was in power, and once they lose power, we go after them. I think if you're gonna make anything stick on Trump, it's got to be the Southern District of New York's case, and you have to say that these are from crimes from before he was a president. Make that clear that this isn't campaign fraud. This is good old fashioned tax fraud. And even then, as much as I loathe that kind of crime, I really do, because I think in the long run it hurts us bad. It hurts the American people more than most crimes. But I think
Yeah, I,
you only slap a fine on him. You do like a Denzel Washington thing, and you pretty much let him go. You know?
yeah. It just seems like to me that when even then they go after some of these politicians, it's really just it still is a banana republic because the super criminals who've been bailed out of their scam businesses, the corporate people, they just laugh and get away with it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there. Finally, last thing, and I did want to save this for the last because it's depressing as fuck. Today, Scott, we broke records. I don't know if you're aware of it. Um, I
Did we
think,
go platinum, baby? We went platinum.
look, all I'm saying is congratulations is in order for America. We did what a lot of people didn't think could happen, especially 9 months into a pandemic. We're peaking. Highest death rate today. Highest death count on record from COVID-19. It happened today. I mean, I think a lot of us are wondering how we did it. We're still kind of, kind of like that moment when you're in the zone and you hit like that 3-point buzzer beater shot, and it's like, God, there's so many people to thank. No, it's sad. It's fucking sad. It really is. 2,650 some people died today. Um, and this from something that we keep being told is it's getting better. There's better treatment, but there's apparently it's not working. Uh, Here's a question I have on this, and this is it sounds like a bit, and it kind of started as a bit, and it was a bit that I wasn't sure if I should run with, and I'm still not sure if I'm going to. But it also in there is an honest question. Here's the question: if the Twin Towers would have been like nursing homes, do you think we would have been okay with 9/11?
I think Cuomo would have lit the fuse himself.
I mean, would we? I mean, 9/11 was this. I mean, for a decade better. You didn't laugh about it. You didn't joke about it. Holy crap, that was sacred ground. It was like they pissed in Jesus's face.
Yeah, you
COVID, we're
don't
already.
forget the T-shirts with the crying eagle.
Yes. Oh yeah, yeah. And the dancing Muslims and the whole bit. COVID is rapidly killing Americans at a much, much higher rate. And it's like, you know what? We're getting better. Things turning a corner. Trump called some of there was a parking garage that was turned into a hospital, and I think it was Boston. I might be wrong, but Trump called it fake. This is after Trump's had COVID, and also went on to say, well, it really wasn't that bad. Yeah, Trump also had $2 million of medical, attention put on him, as the rest of us don't have that. And we're at that point too, by the way. Like, Scott, I don't know if you have insurance. I'm pretty sure you do. But if you didn't, did you know you would have to pay $650 at the minimum for a COVID test?
Yeah, I'd have to sell a car.
Yeah, we can't even we won't even cover the testing cost, which by the way is about the only way you at least kind of slow this thing down. I mean, we're not taking it serious, and I'm not even talking about the anti-maskers or the people who say it's fake, because those people still exist. The 5G people, they still think, well, but obviously it was the 5G that's given everyone the COVID. Those people are still out there. I'm not even talking about any of those. I'm just talking about at a fundamental level, the
Yeah,
government.
people
We're
are
doing
still
nothing.
going to visit people and other, for Thanksgiving. I'm sure it'll happen again at Christmas. I don't think the peak's over. I think it'll be after the new year before people, settle back into, you know, waiting. And at that point, maybe even the vaccines will start to come out. But I think we'll probably continue to rise until the vaccines start making rounds.
If we're looking at 2,600 deaths a day, and I'm not a mathematician. I'm not even close to being able to do that in my head. Uh, Let me check this out here. On
Do you want me to give you that's? Do you want me to give you 26? Do you want me to give you a year at that?
No, I'm just until Christmas. That's 66,000 people dead. Let's just say we stick at that or go higher. Like, do you think number one? Do you think the confidence of the country is going to go down? Meaning
Well,
that
if it continues
willingness.
to peak, that's almost a million people a year.
Yeah. But do you think people are going to, if it keeps at this rate, do you think people are still going to have that confidence to go out in public? Do you think they're still going to want to see family like they do? I mean,
Well, I think the infection rate is kind of changed in the sense that it's not just metropolitan areas anymore. And since the majority of the first peak were metropolitan, they were large cities, and now that that's started to change, I think you're probably going to see people. It's going to impact people a lot more who are maybe living a little bit more fancy free for sure.
do you think it's going to change their habits, or do you think they're going to say, "Well, I can't get it"?
Americans are pretty damn stubborn.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at this like I look at AIDS. I don't know how many friends I had in high school who were like, "Oh, pff, I won't get it." And I mean, now granted, none of them did get AIDS. A lot of them got gonorrhea. There was a ton of the clap going around. Not many of my friends, I mean, none of my friends ever got AIDS, but it's that mentality of like, I'm young, I'm fine, I'm healthy, no problems. So let me ask you a question here. If you had, let's just say, um, something happened to Governor Kelly, and it'd be tragic and all that, but they said, okay, we got to replace Governor Kelly. We're putting Scott. Scott's our new governor, and
I'm lieutenant governor, baby.
you're looking at this infectious rate, and everyone's saying, Scott, what are we gonna do? What do you tell the people? What's your plan?
Well, I think you could tell it in Southern style. Go, look, all you people. Now listen here. I love to ride. I love to go out and see my friends. I love to get on the corner. I like to ride and I like to cruise up and down Main Street and all that stuff. But you people got to realize everybody's dying. So you make a choice right now. I can't force you to, but if you do, it's going to end up keeping your loved ones alive. If you don't want to do that, well then that's all you can do. We offer every bit of help you need. Blah blah blah. Kill yourself or not. That's your choice.
Okay, now, week later, no one stopped. It's still peaking. I'm coming up to you as an advisor. Hey, Scott, Governor Scott, dude, we have half the people who are doing what they should be doing, but they're pissed. They're getting outraged. We have other people who are saying YOLO. They don't give a shit. The the hospitals are they're overfilling. We need money now. We're having a lot of problems with funding. Do we got to get this controlled? What are you gonna do?
Well, you can always do an emergency session and request federal aid for money and blah blah blah. But there is a limit to our resources. We forget that just because we're Americans that we don't have unlimited resources. And never when it comes to medical staff. We have less and less doctors every year.
So
So
what happens when you try to get the federal aid? Donald Trump says, "No, you're a blue governor. I don't like you. No federal money for you."
well, I would say, well, it's only you only got 50 days left to tell me that. But otherwise, if I declare a state of emergency and I refuse to get or I'm getting federal aid, I would force all the big box billionaire companies to pay for it or get out of my state.
I mean, I like that, but that's dangerous. I mean, we're talking about ex-Governor Scott. Because
Well,
someone in a red or blue smock will come up and they'll take you out.
that's when I call the Kansas First Army and the Kansas militias to to go loot Walmart and all the other big companies. They're coming into Best Buy. We're gonna be hawking TVs, baby. We're gonna pay for your COVID stuff.
I love your idea there again, but I think you would have lost them because they don't like going after big corporations. They call that socialism.
I think it's such a mess that there's almost no way you could turn it around. I honestly think people need to learn by death.
No, I mean, look, I kept pushing you in harder. The fact is, though, is many of our governors are dealing with those exact issues where it's like, I can't implement something. If I implement a lockdown, people are gonna say, well, the despair is killing more people. I don't know if that's true. I do know that, and this is a sad statistic, but between the age of 15 and 30 years old, three-fourths of those people have reported a substance abuse problem. 75% of America's youth is hooked on something that they shouldn't be.
Yeah, and I don't know how they can do that because I don't have enough stimulus money to buy any drugs. So that's
Right?
some bullshit.
There's that. Yeah, the suicide rate in 55-year-old men and older is skyrocketing, dangerously skyrocketing. And then, also that same suicide rate between 40 and 55 in men is also going up. It's not as bad as the 55 and older, which I think is odd, by the way. I think if you're 55, you're like, fuck it, I'm old. Like, but anyway, between that 15-year mark, that's also going up. Obviously, people that are dying you know from alcoholism, things like that, that's going up like crazy. All of those things, sedentary, living a sedentary life is hurting a lot of people. They haven't developed the World of Warcraft ass that some of us have. They don't know how to deal with it.
I think it should be mandatory to play Fallout at some point. Well, even Fallout 3 or 4, make everyone play Fallout. And just remember, you're always on the border from or the real close to the red line from self annihilation if you don't play smart. And a lot of people, I mean, it goes back to that thing of basic survival skills. Like how many people could you take? And I'm not saying that if you can't do this, but if things go really south, and they do in other countries, we just forgot that they could still happen here. How many of you could build a shelter and build a fire and keep yourself alive? How many people could hunt and prepare food without giving yourself some horrible parasite? How many? I mean, this is a very basic one. This is even easier than all that. But if you don't want to participate in that, well, I don't have much hope for you or your family if you're not gonna,
I agree. And I think,
play the easy game.
that's where we are lucky in this state and especially in this town. I think that's one of the top priorities for a lot of people here. And so I think when they're hearing, there's enough of those people who have been preparing. They've been prepping since, you know, the Clinton administration or better, the 80s. They've been waiting for something like this, and now those people are finally starting to come around. And they're like, "Oh, this is about preservation. This is real." It took them a while to accept it. And I think that's maybe why we're not getting it as bad as a lot of other people are. Now, granted, our hospital is filling up rapidly right now, but I don't think it's out of people who are just being dumb. I think it's a lot of, you know, it's a lot of. I think even at its best, if you do everything you possibly can do, you're always going to forget to wash your hands at some point. You're always going to end up walking through your house and forgot to take your shoes off when you got in, and you just tracked COVID into your house. I mean, there's always going to be something.
Or dog shit, but one of them's more dangerous.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think they're both pretty bad, but yeah. I mean, there's always going to be something like that happens, though, that like it's going to be impossible to completely stop, and especially if it's very highly infectious. But I do think, that it's sad that honestly we can joke, and this is my whole bit kind of comes around. We joke about COVID. Why? Why is it okay to joke about COVID, but not about 9/11? And I still say that I think it's because there's just a ton of old people dying, and if 9/11 was nursing homes, people probably wouldn't even thought about it. There were some people who their whole lives were upended. They lived in Cincinnati and they did nothing but watch 24-hour news because they were like, it's going to happen again. Oh my God. If it was nursing homes that planes crashed into, people would be like, who cares? You know what?
And
But
I'll
they
tell you,
lived a
I'll be the
good
first
life.
one. I'll wear the shirt that says, just like with the crying eagle that says, "I remember," the COVID thing. As long as it shows like some racist caricature of the Chinese like sprinkling virus on us, I'll wear that T-shirt.
I'm sure you would. I'd almost bet that you definitely would. Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. And it's sad. It's sad today because yeah, we are running out of places to put the bodies, which is that's disturbing.
Yeah, and it's come back to China too, which a lot of people don't realize.
I mean, we got okay, clear countries that are clear of it or clear-ish. We got Australia, New Zealand, Japan is doing well with it, but it's not completely gone. I heard Japan is pretty much like we were in like February, where it's like,
Yeah, you'll never be able to tell how North Korea is doing. South Korea has had some. They're reinstituting some lockdowns in
yeah,
South Korea. it's going to continue to wave, and there's a good chance it'll mutate as well. So
That's terrifying. Because what if it mutates to something like the flu, how the flu mutates, and we're just guessing on a vaccine, and this has just become
well,
something we
it
live
is
with?
the flu in a sense. I mean, it really is.
Right,
It's a
right.
mutated version of the flu. So I mean, there's no reason to think that it can't mutate as fast as the flu does.
That's what I
Um,
was.
and
Yeah.
and and every time a virus infects somebody, there's a possibility of when they spread it, they spread flu viruses that have changes in it. So I mean, we're never ever going to completely beat viruses because even there's viral DNA encoded into our own DNA, and so we've been living with these things for
Let me.
probably at least as far as what you consider human for about 300,000 years. So we're not going to get over it, but we're smart enough now to be able to practice things a little bit safer.
So
And
I made a joke about this on stage. I don't know, a few years ago, that science is worthless because the last thing that they were able to do was to vaccinate for polio. And that's not the whole bit. It's just that's the end. That's like the setup. Um, but again, like I say, there's always some truth to a joke. Um, that is kind of true. Like, what virus have we actually eradicated? Is there one?
well, well, we've for the longest time, um, up
Smallpox?
until recently. Well, smallpox, and even in some third world countries, we had almost eliminated smallpox and God, there's scarlet fever and a whole bunch of other things. Even in third world countries, we had because the vaccination of those countries that weren't so scary that they thought it was the voodoo prince coming in to give. They literally in some African countries they thought that we were giving them AIDS with the vaccinations for other things, and
Okay,
so they would.
hold up though, because in the Middle East, we actually did quote unquote vaccinate certain certain groups of people, and what we ended up doing was actually um, basically it was chemical castration. Like we're on record of doing that. So like it's not like this is part of that like Trump is always calling everything
Oh,
fake
you mean
news.
the distrust that comes from it? Sure, and that's
Yes,
where the
yeah.
anti-vaxxers come in. Before all this happened, I don't know if you remember, we had absolutely not record, they were off the chart because they didn't exist before people started the anti-vaxxer movement. And then all these children, and we're not talking about like, Mennonites or people who live in some kind of antique state. We're talking about regular citizens in California and other places who were choosing not to vaccinate
Oh
their
yeah,
children.
tons in California,
And
by the way.
then,
Yeah.
yeah, and then going to other countries and bringing back those viruses and then being super spreaders. And of course, the only people getting infected are number one, they were getting children infected before their normal vaccination time. So they have schedules
Yeah.
for vaccination. And if you subvert that by getting your young child infected and sending them to school, well, then you just infected, a school full of children. And, that herd immunity is but you still have to deal with the vaccination schedule. So, I mean, that was a real big wake up call. I mean, as far as I know, that a lot of people went, okay, I'm not going to play this game. I'm going to go get my kids vaccinated.
Do you know much
I'm not
about?
exactly sure. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, do you know much about like the Spanish flu, the 1918, which by the way originated in Kansas, and I really think we should change it to the Kansas flu because, God damn it, all we have is a band called Kansas. We need something more. But the Spanish flu,
Yeah, I'm down.
1918, 1919, I think 1919 is when it killed the most people. Do you know much about that?
Well, I know
Like,
enough about
do
it
you, do you know its
as far
makeup?
as the
Yeah,
amount of people that it killed.
right, but I guess I'm saying, like, do you know why we were able to eradicate that? Like, did it not mutate? Did it not?
Well, you understand, it happened so rapidly. It was killing. So when you kill the hosts, they don't have a time to spread. I mean, that's really the thing. The incubation period was shorter,
Uh-huh.
And when people are immobilized quicker because they don't have any kind of medical help, they just had wards and wards of people, you know, that were just dying. So that's how a lot of things, like, for instance, just to use HIV as an example. You know, we pretty much got a control on HIV. Do we have a control on its spread? No, but what we do have control of is the virus itself becoming full blown AIDS instead of just having the HIV virus within those people. Now those people can still spread the virus, but it's less likely that they'll spread it as a fully infected person. In other words,
Okay,
you know, and there's probably some legal means around it, but
I hear what you're
that's
saying.
why it's
I
not a
guess what I'm saying is why don't we still have the Spanish, the 1918 flu? Like, why isn't
because
that
as far as
still
I
an
know,
issue?
it mutated into a harmless form years later.
Okay. Okay. That was my question. So there's potential that Corona could also just downgrade itself and just become
Yeah,
like
well,
a headache
it
you
could.
get.
Well, that's what it has to transition between, and that's where a lot of the controversy comes in. Is it's still, regardless of what one news station or the other, because they've bounced around, the as far as I know, is I'm not going to take the Chinese government's word for it. And it's kind of like 9/11 and some of the other things. It's very coincidental that the place that was first exposed was exactly where a bioweapons virology lab was, just down the street, and from that, and those would be the viruses they would be experimenting on. We have Chinese defectors that were doctors and virologists who have said it came from our lab, and that's a completely expected thing
Here's
that they would be
here's the
working on.
here's the thing about this though. If it's synthetic, then it wouldn't mutate the way that it could.
No, no, absolutely, that's not incorrect. There's no synthetic about it. It's a virus that existed in animals, like they said for once the bats, and they changed it from bats to pangolins. And if you don't know what a
But
pangolin is,
they would
don't
have to
worry, it's
change
just a
its
crazy.
they would have to change its makeup though for it to be so infectious to
The only
humans.
thing no, no, no. All you have to do is cultivate the versions of the virus which carry a gene for certain transmissions. In other words, our bodies contain particular chemical makeups, and a lot of viruses can't exist within the human genome or the human biome.
Right.
That's how we stay healthy.
I,
We're
gue-
too
I guess.
acrid, or it's very simple. All they have to do is, if you want to create a virus, is you just get viruses that have a gene that allows them to exist and multiply in the human body, and give those viruses that gene. That's all you have to do. Now, viruses are extremely simple. They don't have a lot of genes, and they have a short lifespan. So even though they don't have a lot of genes, they multiply and die off really quickly. Generational. It's kind of like, how many generations of ants exist by the time you have one generation of people? Well, that's probably in the millions. You
Here,
know
here,
how it goes. And
here's the
viruses are even
argument.
more.
And by the way, not a fan of the Chinese government. So this is not me defending them. It's me logically thinking about it. But if they, number one, if you were going to make a weapon like this, why would you also risk your own people dying of it? And
Oh
let
well.
me throw this out too. Wouldn't you create a vaccine?
Well,
Like,
no, not if you're the Chinese government. I mean, I could give
of
you
course you
probably
wouldn't.
50 examples of things that the Chinese government experiments on. But for instance, when they first detonated one of their first nuclear weapons in the 60s, early 60s, we were very aware that the radiation and everything else was. We did it 20 years before. We knew, don't run your soldiers into the blast wave. you know,
Right. Okay. Here's
don't do.
well, and it's just like the kamikazes of Japan and the no, I get it. But what I'm saying is like that inner circle of power. Those politicians, those military men, the obviously um, the leader himself. He's not standing by a blast explosion, and by not having a vaccine, they're kind of allowing themselves to possibly be infected by it. That's what
You're
saying.
also
They should
talking
have it.
about a country.
Not to
Well,
mention,
yes,
wait,
but
here's one other
you're
thing.
also talking about a country that's kind of overpopulated in a lot of ways, who just recently restricted birth of females.
But here's
For
one
the longest time.
here's one other thing about it. Well, again though, they could still get it. I mean, so they'd have to have a vaccine on top of that. Here's my
Well,
biggest argument for why they wouldn't do it is because
well, let me just
it's
say real
not.
quickly that it doesn't necessarily mean that the release was intentional. You hear what I'm saying? It could have
No,
just been literally a worker.
I hear what you're saying. It like part of it doesn't make sense to me. As in, like for one, if it was gonna be a bioweapon, as a bioweapon, it's a shitty bioweapon. Like
Really? Are you
yeah,
sure? Would you, I can't believe you actually say that now.
I do because
Like we were just talking about mass death.
if you were gonna use this in, let's say, I don't know, a war, and you were going to drop this on your opposing soldiers or enemy soldiers, they wouldn't feel it for like a week.
That's right. But guess what?
And
That's not
by
how
the
we
way,
fight wars anymore. We
and
fought wars with China economically, and this has been an economic disaster.
okay, so hear me out. It's also been an economic disaster for them because they rely on us for money. We buy their crap. And so if our economy is failing, so is theirs. Not to mention
Really? Who
this.
do you think supplies Amazon with everything that they've sold in record sales?
Again, well, but again, they wouldn't want to mess with that. I'm sure that, like, them knowing how this
Hey,
would play out
there's been
doesn't
lots of
add up.
markets all over the world that have suffered from it. Even the PC market, the silicon market, tons of things have been in short supply. I mean, just just ask your friends who can't get an Xbox or a PlayStation. I guarantee you, Sony and Microsoft want to put one in your hands. They don't make money unless they get one in your hands. In
Yeah,
fact, they lose money on every machine.
some of that
So,
though has
so
nothing to do with manufacturing though.
you know,
A lot of that
well,
has to
some
do
of it
with
does.
bots and
Some of it does because a lot of the silicone and the parts that go into those systems are the exact same things that go into PCs. And if you've been an avid PC person, you would know that the video card market, the 3D cards, has been horrible as far as production rate. NVIDIA and AMD have had problems because the factories in China have not been able, they've had to shut down this factory for a while, shut down this factory. There's been
so.
shortages.
But here's my point though. They're missing money, so why would they fight this economic war that way when it's hurting them
Like
too?
I said, I'm not saying it was intentional. It could have just simply been accidental.
But
I mean, we've
even if it
busted a
was,
couple Chinese people in America within the last couple years, literally transporting viruses in a case at the airport.
what I'm saying though is you said, well, this is not how we fight wars anymore. So like we would use it in the future, or they would use it in the future. But why would that be a move? Why would that be something they
Why
do
would
if they're
that be?
going to take
Because
their own
if
economy
you have a
down?
controlled right, but if you don't release it accidentally and you have the time to cultivate a good antivirus, or if you have a vaccine for yourself and for your people, then when you have a controlled release, you're not in the you're not in dire straits. That's why an accident makes the most sense because they were like, "Oh crap, what do we do? We weren't done with this. We weren't ready for it yet."
See, and
And it's
I would
also
buy that if they were like the first to come out with a vaccine, because then you'd be like, oh well, they had prior knowledge to this.
they
You'd think
don't.
that.
The Chinese have resources, but there doesn't mean they have the best people for everything. And like I said, that if it had been on their timetable, in maybe 3 or 4 years, they would have had time, no problem, to have a vaccine and produce it before they would say release it on purpose.
I don't
But
know. I just
yeah, sure, it's
logically it just doesn't completely add up, and I don't know what the point of it would be.
well, accidents happen. You don't really need to use a lot of logic when it comes to accidents happen, other than the fact that every government, especially in first world, including ours, including China, probably including Canada and everybody else, the UK and Europe, everyone has an active bioweapons and containment where they
Sure,
keep some of
sure.
the world's deadliest viruses,
No,
and they work on
100%.
them.
No, that is true. I think though that I guess what I'm saying is like with like someone like China, their power as a superpower is the economy. And the economy is only strong when everybody is able to work, everyone's able to purchase things, money is being passed around. So the hint of a bioweapon just doesn't add up. Now, I'm not saying like they wouldn't be working or researching something because that could totally happen. But then that takes me back to two main points. Number one, not defending China, like I said, but there has been no proof. Even that, you talked about someone who escaped. But you're talking about that one lady who came out and she was proven to be false. She had said she was going to drop this information. Then it ended up being like basically like a paywall kind of thing. It's like, "Ah, come on, stupid. If it was real, you would just say it. You would give all the information, and we would have it, instead of being like, "I'll drop. I'm gonna give more out next week and more out
Well,
the
there's
week
a
after."
misnomer that first of all, there's a misnomer that you can look at a virus. For instance, the people there's been back and forth. There is no physical way to tell that a virus has been genetically modified. There's no way to prove that, pro or con. That's a lie. Whoever told this that, oh, we can tell from the looking at this virus, that's
I never
absolute
said that.
horseshit.
I never said that.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying you said that. I'm saying there has been back and forth of scientists saying
Right,
there's
but I'm
no
saying what is
evidence that it was
that's not
manufactured.
relevant to my last reply, though, is what I'm saying.
Well, but okay, that even if that last lady or whatever was like a faker, she put up a paywall, she was just scamming or whatever. That's very possible. What I'm saying is you don't even need, you can't get the proof of like of being synthetically, or not synthetically, but advanced, or being produced by a lab. A virus is just going to have another a protein sequence, in other words,
So
to stay alive in the human body, and that can happen naturally.
here's my
So I
here,
mean,
here's my whole argument why I'm not into it, though. Is you just said there was no way to prove it, no way. There's no way to prove it wasn't from an animal either. So basically, you're just going on
no,
a
it's
gut
definitely
feeling.
no. We can prove that this version of the virus had previously existed only in a few animals. We can do that. It had not made the jump to humans. So it could have happened naturally, but most likely because of the scenario and the timing, and people who, not that woman, but even some of the early, there were multiple doctors that left the virology lab that were whistleblowers that disappeared. They didn't make it over here. They're gone
Yeah, but the
from Earth.
whistleblowers like you're talking about were all about the severity in the in the actual disease, and the fact that the Chinese government wasn't
It was
paying
both.
attention. They weren't taking
It,
care of their
it was both.
people. And by the
It was
way,
both.
those virologists
Yeah.
didn't come from the lab that where it was supposedly created. They were from different labs. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Well,
That's all I'm
and
saying is
but
like
they
there's nothing concrete about it, so I don't
right.
like.
There, any place that runs top secret is going to be very compartmentalized, and you're not going to have a lot of discussion between. But let me just tell you, it's not if. Every government, including the Chinese that have no scruples about it, not that we have anymore, we all are developing bioweapons.
I
Don't
agree.
get
Yeah.
your Yeah, I'm just saying. So we know they're doing it, and when a virus that had never made a jump from the particular animals that we knew carry it, and that is provable, all of a sudden makes its appearance known, and the wet market kind of thing. People are, oh well, the Chinese eat all kinds of weird, poor little animals, but it was also the wet markets right next to your virology lab. So I mean, it almost doesn't matter.
No,
Uh,
here's the reason why I do say it does matter, and it's unless there's proof. Even if there was proof, I think all you do is say, "Oh, you bastards, you lied." Um,
Well, I wouldn't blame
because
the Chinese people, but I will demonize the Chinese
well,
government.
I
It's
would
just
I
one
would
more.
blame the Chinese people that worked there. I mean, definitely saying you should have
I
said
don't know,
something.
man.
But
If you ever worked for a Nazi regime, try to get out of it.
let me just say three letters, WMD, because I don't know how many people I talked to. Oh, Iraq has WM. We've seen WMDs. We find out decades later. No, there was nothing. We didn't find it was a decade later. It was like a year later. Never was there, and that started a war. And that's why I'm saying it does kind of matter because if there is no proof, that they did this.
But you know
And
what Iraq did have? You know what they did have? They had bioweapons.
well, let me just
They
say.
had
Oh,
sarin
and by
gas.
the way,
They had mustard gas.
they had no willingness to attack America with those either. But we still attacked them.
No, they weren't. They weren't the long range. And I'm
But
not. That's
what
the
I'm
whole
saying,
thing.
what I'm saying though
It
too, is
could be
like
just an accident.
at the end of the day, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do
Well,
about it?
nothing.
Are we gonna start a war over it? No, that's
Well, we're not going to. Well, that's the thing. That's a war we would win, but we would lose economically that way too. We could go in and decimate all the large Chinese cities and take out all their infrastructure in probably a couple days. China
I don't know
does
about
not
that.
have. Oh, you should see the difference in military power. It's almost a joke. Okay,
You're talking about.
let me
Are you
explain something to
talking
you about
about
the difference
just
in. You know how many aircraft carriers China has?
zero? We've got like 8. But my point.
No, we have like 14, and that's just aircraft carriers.
My
We
point.
also
No, no.
have
My point is,
battleships and destroyers, and no, I'm just giving
it
you
wouldn't be us versus China. You know that. It
it
would
would
not be.
probably be. I don't know if Russia would join in or not.
Dude, you know Russia. Dude, the UK would be like, you gotta back the fuck off. You're gonna fuck with our
Yeah,
economy.
well,
You're gonna fuck with our flag. I mean,
the reason
every
that's
other
probably
country.
not going to happen, well, and that's what's scarier is that we will never be using our big boy weapons to settle those things anymore.
No.
And unless there's an all-out attack to begin with, we probably won't be the people who literally go and blow up a country anymore.
By the way,
I
just throwing this as comparison, China to Iraq, or even Iraq to Afghanistan, should be nothing compared. Like, think of how long we have been bumble farting around in the Middle East and
Yeah,
can't
but
get shit done.
Afghanistan but that's as a whole different. Even the Russians abandoned Afghanistan. We should have learned beforehand
But it's not
that you
really
can't
even.
guerrilla fight in the mountains because it's just an extended thing that no one ever wins.
I
It's
think you
almost like
could.
going back to Vietnam.
You could. But the problem, you can't ever do that. Like, war, I don't know if war has ever actually worked, quote unquote. I mean, let's be
Well, I
honest.
mean,
Like the Nazis,
right.
World War II, I think a big chunk of it was like the majority of the country actually had no idea what the Nazis were doing. And when it was found out, it was like, holy crap,
Sure. If
that's
we hadn't
us.
beat the Nazis to the punch and Hitler had decided to invest a lot more time instead of building giant, artillery, if he'd invested the money in nuclear weapons, we may be singing a different song right now. But because a lot of the Jewish defectors came over here and we realized, hey, Hitler could be developing this. We know he's working on it, but he didn't take it seriously.
No,
And
I don't
yeah.
think you're getting what I'm saying. I'm saying the Nazi regime as itself, I think once exposed for their war crimes and for then the genocide, is when the German people were like, oh, I don't want to be a part of that. Meaning, we had to kill the soul of who the Nazis were, so to speak. And we didn't even do, I mean, it wasn't even that big of a deal. It turned out Germans aren't bad people. And when they found out how bad it got, that's when you
They
know
were
what I'm saying?
terrified, just like everybody else.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know if you can actually beat a people unless you beat who they are. And you can't. I don't think you can beat a, I mean, Irish and Scottish is a good example of this. I mean, they went to war with each other for, I mean, bloody, horrible fights. And you could still never kill being what a Scot is or what an Irishman is because it's in your blood, it's who you are. And no matter how much decimation you put on that country, unless you just completely did a genocide, they're gonna come out still being an Irishman or a Scot. And I think
Well,
that's the same thing.
nobody wants to blow up Chinese history. I mean, nobody.
And
My
that's
roommates
what
in college are both Chinese. I mean, I think
that's what I'm
Chinese
saying.
culture is
I think that
right,
the war that could be won, if we were gonna go to war with China, it starts
but
in
that's what I'm
Hong
trying to
Kong
tell you. Is
right now.
there will not be. We're not going to be shipping tanks. We're not going to be throwing nukes. We're not going to be doing anything. And China, I don't think it would be doing that either. Even if their arsenal, which there's a calculator on YouTube that shows detonation and arsenal growth and depletion also between all the major powers. But those wars won't be fought like that anymore. They're almost irrelevant.
No.
The real wars are exactly what we're seeing. They're technological, so they're patent stealing. And not that we don't do some of the espionage for self. So we're talking about corporate espionage is a huge threat.
Right.
Power infrastructure, a big threat. And the sun is also probably even bigger of a threat than China when it comes to power infrastructure. Just wait for your next X-class solar flare to hit us straight on. So there are lots of threats, but this is one threat that is easier to cultivate, and as technology gets better and better, these kinds of viral threats, these kinds of technological threats, they are where the real war is. And economic threats. If you can crush a country economically, you can also crush their morale, and you can also crush their healthcare system. You can also weaken them, and to reject their own government.
And again, I'm not saying you're wrong, 'cause I think you're right with a lot of it. The one thing I do debate though too is if we were going to do, wouldn't like just a well-placed EMP do much more damage?
Well, I mean, that's what a solar flare is basically an
Right, of
EMP.
course.
It's particles that overload the electrical. I just made up a new word. The electric grid. They overpower it. They send a charge. They blow up all of the transformers. And if you don't know, those big giant tin cans on your power pole, those transformers, those are giant capacitors basically, and those take a long time to manufacture. They don't just pump those out.
And
So
that's what I'm saying. Like, if you were going to want to, to fight a quote unquote war, or just limp a country, like, wouldn't that be the better route? Like, that's literally something
well, and there
that
is
I
one
have
way to do
feared for
that.
years.
That's you're right. That's one way to do that. That is where nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, can do some serious damage. If detonated in space, ballistic missiles create an EMP wave. So if you detonate a whole bunch of huge, like say 10 or 20 megaton, H bombs up in space, and it's just line of sight. So anything below is going to get an EMP. They won't get hardly irradiated with anything. There won't be any fallout. There won't be anything, but it will blow up every satellite. In a sense, will fry every satellite, and it will overload people's electrical grids. And they say if we were hit by an X-class solar flare, a direct hit, it could take up to 10 years to get people all back into power.
Oh
That's
yeah,
how.
you don't know. I would snap. I mean, I would snap if they told me it's gonna be a year. That'd be it. Like, I'm going like Mad Max, like
Yo,
just
I'm
like
full on. I've got the steel plate and the welding ready to go on the Forerunner, baby.
it'd be just like
Telling you.
it'll be like the next day you'll just come to my house and I'll be half naked with like spikes coming out of me and like blood and an axe. Be like, let's go. Like, no, and like, I'm just saying, like, I think that would be if you really, but again, I think, if we're going to fight a war with China, and even if we think, hell, if we want to give them retribution for COVID, if we want to pin that on them, which I'm not saying we should, because I really don't think it's fair in a lot of ways. And only because they're, again, like, then do we take shit for smallpox or for the Kansas flu, or, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Well,
crap happens.
we definitely have to recognize intent. And if a bio lab here in America, for some reason, some worker, because they can kind of trace, just like we know that our first patients came from Europe and not from China.
Right.
That doesn't mean that the virus didn't come from China. It just means that some of the first travelers, made their way this way. We can go to patient zero for those things, but the intent is still they didn't have the same kind of bioweapons technology that we do today. And if you can weaponize just about anything contagious that you want to, it's more difficult to weaponize things that mutate so fast. So, like you said, it could mutate into something harmless. That probably is not going to be the case. It will change. But there's really this is a fight that it's not new. I mean, it's just we forgot because it's been 100 years. Is what it's been. It's been 100 years since we had to be reminded that we are weak, meat bags full of water and we were just like walking sewage ponds. We were just ready to breed just about anything that can. And
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I would say that though, to be honest. I mean, because I mean, I think cancer has always been at the back of everyone's mind. You know, if it's not cancer, it's heart disease, it's AIDS. AIDS was huge in the 80s. I mean, I don't remember because I was barely alive,
I
but I've
was
seen a lot
around.
of I've seen a
I was
lot of
young.
movies, and I remember AIDS being like, a real. I mean, people thought for a while in like the
Right. It was
early
first. It was
80s.
a gay disease, and there's a reason that it made its way through the homosexual community first. But AIDS is. Did you know AIDS is over? It even in the 80s. I think it had been recognized in the early 1900s. That's how old AIDS was. They just didn't know what to call it. They didn't know how to classify it. They didn't know what a retrovirus was.
Took Reagan a long
They
time
didn't
to
know what a T
recognize
cell
it.
receptor. They didn't know that. So there are so many things. So AIDS wasn't anything new. It was just, it was a simian virus. So in a lot of ways, it probably they think that it was transferred of the practice of eating primate brain. So, which is completely normal
Right.
in a lot of those countries that eat monkeys and stuff like that. So it wasn't some kind of, the devil gave it to us, or it wasn't some gay disease. It was actually a monkey disease, and we like
Well,
to eat weird shit.
I think what they had the most popular theory is when they were chopping up monkey, somebody accidentally like cut their hand.
Oh well, I'm sure, but
And that was part of
we
it.
can tell what viruses came from what animals because a lot of, like I was telling you the other day, we know when there was an AIDS epidemic within all the large cats, and this was a few million
Yeah,
years ago.
you're talking
Yeah,
about that.
and that evidence is actually in their genome because those viruses transpose some of their own literal DNA into ours, and that's how. I mean, the human genome is just genomics in general is just an insane subject. But we just have to realize we're not and people don't understand science anymore. I mean, we rely on this collective internet in order to learn and cultivate information, but we've become less and less educated. And like both of us were saying the other day about classical, education, even a couple hundred years ago here in America was so far. You don't understand what people had to read, what they had to learn, and granted, less people had access to that education, but that's why it was so valued when you did, is because it made your mind powerful and it made you
Yeah, but
understand things on a different level.
here's the question. All those people that read those fancy books, though, how many likes do you think they got on their latest TikTok video? You know what I'm saying? Like, let's be honest. Who's got more clout?
Well, I was wearing my brassiere in the last TikTok video, and I was pouring a glass of cold water over myself for like some kind of cancer research. And at the same time, I was hoping that I didn't expose myself too much to get my account banned.
It
But it's
was
okay because
great.
TikTok actually bans complainers and not the people who are actually violating policy. So I'm good.
To be honest though, any people who are making TikTok, it's easy to get a lot of likes in TikTok. If you are hurting, if you are hurting for attention, I made
Maybe we can run that
I
social
made
experiment and report back to the channel
I
and
made
let our listeners know.
one TikTok video of my daughter who's 5 months, or at the time she was 4.5 months, but she was eating green beans for the first time, and she makes this like really disgusted face. So far, it's over 6,000 likes. Like, I just
Yeah.
made one TikTok video and threw it up there. I don't know, pretty easy. Anyway, just one last thing. I just want to say though, if we were going to get into war with China, and I think we already kind of are, to an extent, like in the ways that you're talking about, I think the answer would be Hong Kong, and to aid Hong Kong in, what they're doing right now.
Yeah, it would be. Though that would cause the Chinese government to lose their damn mind.
Yeah,
But
but
in
I
a
mean,
way,
we already have
but
though.
it's too late for Hong Kong in a lot of ways. But there is another place that we can do that where it's not too late. You know
Beijing,
where that is, right?
Beijing,
No, no. But Beijing is central China. I'm talking about another country who is trying to be scooped up by
Taiwan.
the Chinese. There you go. We have an opportunity. Taiwan is a technical powerhouse. China wants them. They've always said, no, 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 just because most of you speak Chinese or speak like Mandarin, or it just does not mean, or Fujianese, whatever they speak in Taiwan, that you're us. They are. So they don't want to be in Chinese. They don't want to be a member of China. And China is going to try to make a move to try to slurp up
I think that's
Taiwan. And we need to be there for that.
I still don't think we duck. And I'm not saying we actively get involved, but already we have. I mean, people like Ted Cruz and people like that have visited Hong Kong to show support for what they're doing and
Yeah,
their
I feel horrible
protests.
about the HK people. It's so bad.
And
People need to realize that when they were protesting, they were holding up American flags.
and here's how we do it, by the way. We get everyone together, and this is where I don't. This is this is why I don't like Trump, and this is why I wish this would have happened under like Obama. Obama probably would have done this honestly, um, because he likes being this kind of person, and you can tell that he did this in Iran essentially. But if he would have got together with and there's still time, by the way, there's still time to do this, but if they get together with Australia and most of Europe and other big buyers, and they say, look, we're going to propose to the Chinese government that we won't do business with them if they do not honor the freedom of the people who live in Hong Kong. And I think you'll get the ball rolling on that. I don't know if how successful you will be, but I think it really gets to push on how important is
Oh
Hong
no,
Kong
the
really
UN would
to
throw
China.
that back in every one of those countries' faces. Russia would absolutely say, "Don't do that. If you do that, we're going to do this." There's
Russia
no way.
can't
Europe
really
would be
do
the
very
first
much.
people to fold on something like that.
The only thing Russia can do is to try to control oil prices, but even then they can't because I
Right.
mean,
They would do that to the people in Europe. That's what I'm saying. And the Chinese have a lot of power within the UN. And as we've just been, demonstrated as far as that, even the WHO has got Chinese power. They refuse to let the Taiwan people be a member of the World Health Organization. So there would be more pushback than I think. You
you're
didn't
probably
see too
no,
much
no,
support for Hong Kong.
you're probably right that there would be quite a bit of pushback. I don't denounce that, but I do think that that's an that would be a smart play to work in. And then to, like as your first play, but to keep a lot of other initiatives going and to continue to fight for that. Now, I don't think they will. I really don't because, to be honest, like Biden, uh, his cabinet and his administration himself, and I think even they're they're fine with China being the third
Oh
world
yeah, Hunter's got
manufacturers.
Chinese business interests. He just got a bunch of money from China.
Well, they all do. That's the problem. They all do. I mean, you you
And
know,
there within lies the problem of how these wars won't be fought like that. Even the EMP thing, because
yeah,
you don't want to cut off their money supply, they don't want to cut off theirs, but
exactly.
they are willing. The Chinese government is what you must understand is they are just like they absorb the capitalism of their people. So their people work hard and use the good capitalism to make money. And by the way, the government employs unbelievable amounts of people. So they have a hold on their people like you cannot imagine. When even their credit system, not credit cards,
No, yeah,
but their
there's
social
social
media
credit. Yeah,
scores. Oh my God, what a nightmare! What
right.
a nightmare! If you're just recorded or somebody reports you as saying anything anti-government, you can be removed from a fly list. You won't be able to take the subway. You can't get a loan. You can't buy a car. You can't eat in certain places. You can't travel.
You
I
can have
mean,
certain apartments. I think the only way that we can help that, by the way, is voting on policy. Like a lot of people want to get involved. They want to do something. Vote by policy. Y- Don't vote for your party. Don't vote for the guy who you think you'd like to have a beer with. Vote for the person who's actually stood up for people in Hong Kong. Vote for the person who stands
do
by the
you? Let
policies
me
you
throw a
want.
question at you. Do you think that the American people, in general,
care.
would stand behind a policy that is obviously, let's just say that it's righteous and it's what we should do, and it would it's to stand up to that kind of tyranny, but it would hurt us economically in a few ways. Like people would feel it. You like we'll say like the average American family would say pay $400 more a year for all of their goods by comparison. Like we're talking everything put together, like a car part or something else. Do you think the American people would, and you lay that out as part of the policy, like what we're going to do here is we're going to pull this, we're going to pull the noose a little closer up to the neck on the Chinese
Let me
communists
let me ask you a
on the
question.
government.
Let me ask you a question on this. Are there any supporters in America for not doing this plan? Like, is there in your scenario
I don't.
here? Like, is I don't
I
know.
think most. This is where me and you are going to agree, and it's not a good place to agree. It's that we that we know that most people make decisions um, based on quick fixes and how can it benefit me now. They're not concerned with anyone else in the world, and you don't have to be a stupid Greta
No, I
Thunberg
guess
to be.
hear me out. Hear me out. What I'm saying is, or what I'm asking you is like uh, your plan, like with this plan that you're talking about, theoretically, would there also
Yeah,
be any
hypothetical.
people who are against it who, I don't know, might be in the media or might have a big
Or
company
might
or
have business interests in
might have
China.
politicians? That's what I'm asking. Uh, yes or no on that? Like, is there,
I
or is
mean,
this
are you
all
asking me if it'd be harder to push politically than it would be socially?
sort of what I'm actually asking you is in this theoretical, do we just, is this all what we're told? Is like, hey, we should stand up to them, but this is going to cost us $400 over a year, and then that's it? That's all the people know? Or are there
Oh
people
no, it would be great if we could lay out everything to people. Let's just say that we lay it out and say what this should force the Chinese government to do. Like they won't. This is all 4D chess. They won't have a recourse to, necessarily buy from somebody else. We have to cut them off
okay,
of
yeah,
this
yeah,
and
yeah, I
that.
get you.
We'll have
So,
to take lower prices on our commodities and sell them to other countries. Maybe we'll give some of our extra grain and stuff to starving countries for free.
in your theory,
Whatever it takes. Yeah.
in your your theoretical, thing here, there's like the Chinese lobbyists have no power over here. Um,
Oh, you expunge them. No, you
MSNB,
just remove them.
MSNBC, CNN, Fox, the Trumps, the Clinton, none of them have any sort of say, is what you're saying. Because if they did, here's what they would say is they would bring up this whole, well, you know what, you're going to kill manufacturing, you're going to kill capitalism, blah blah blah. I mean, it's like Medicare for all. How many fools complain about the system, complain about the red tape and blah blah blah? How, and then when we get a chance to vote for Medicare for all, they're like, well, I want my choice on my doctor, even though that's not even part of it at all. But they get stuck in
Yeah,
this
and that's
dumb.
where I said that you and me are going to agree because we're asking those people to not only educate themselves on why this is important, why another country is important, but to take a windfall and or to take a punch at least in their pocketbook in order to do something good for the future. This would almost be like this can benefit your children.
But yeah, I think though, if they, if the American people were given this scenario, like I just like Medicare for all, I believe if people actually heard the truth and they heard it all laid out, they would easily vote for it. I mean, it's already popular, it really is. Um,
But but
I
but
think
let
this is
me ask you
something that we
something though.
would.
But it's easier to say we're going to get hurt and we're going to take a punch for this, and this is how it's going to affect us, than it is to say the information on you know the accounting that would really have to go on to uh, push people to also do taxation increase to take care of everybody else, and that would be Americans first, and how easily that's rejected by people is what you're saying, then we come to the same answer, which
Well,
is
yes and no. Like there again, that's not really true. Like there again, the taxation you're talking about wouldn't affect most, like for Medicare for all, for instance, like the taxation would not affect most Americans. In fact, like most of our bloat is in insurance companies, and those would all go away. You know what I'm saying? Like
You know,
when you actually break it
right, and I
down,
do understand that
you're actually
that's the
spending
real
less
problem with
money.
Medicare for All, in my opinion, is the amount of medical staff that literally doesn't exist, as far as the doctors willing to take smaller salaries.
They don't have
You're
to.
asking,
That's not the art. No, see, I think you've been sold a lie there. That's not part of it at all.
well, that's how the
That's
insurance companies operate,
it's
right?
literally cutting out the insurance companies. That's
Right,
pretty much
but then you
Medicare for
force
all.
doctors into not being able to bid for their services.
They wouldn't work for the insurance companies.
I understand. You remove the insurance companies, and now doctors don't get to bid for their services. In other words, when you remove the incentive of the insurance companies, you know how say you go get a medical exam right there, and they say, well, we're going to cover this, but not this, right? Well, the obviously, if you have a very expensive insurance plan that has a lot of coverage, you're going to get that. Well, the doctors and the hospitals and are business within themselves.
Right.
So they bid for doctors' salaries. They bid for everything else. Not only do they have to cover the doctors' salaries as a conglomerate business, but they also have to do new infrastructure, buy new technology, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if an institution is, you know, big fancy, most of people's low ass tier insurance is not even going to touch it. They're going to be like, you have to go get this procedure at cheap ass hospital. You can't go here because that's where some of the, you know, most highly paid doctors are, some of the most expensive specialists, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that which doesn't seem fair, and I don't necessarily think it is fair, but that don't a lot of times what now we all know that hospitals bloat charges of like a tube of bacitracin or something for $150, or some Tylenol they give you while you're in the hospital. It's
It's
$20 a fucking
classically
pill. I mean,
classically right now during a pandemic. I think the Heritage Foundation did a whole study and found like there are some hospitals in America that are charging 1,800% over cost.
oh yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, and but you know why that happens too? It's the same. It's with the insurance companies, and like I said, you know, the insurance companies are profiting off a lot of that, and so is the hospital. The insurance companies allow the hospital to set their prices on procedures and items, whether they're worth it or not.
A lot of times the
And so,
hospitals have to though, like for the cost of the insurance. I actually
right,
know a guy who who manages the financing at our local hospital, and like you wouldn't be surprised how often they're on the break of like having no money.
right. And I completely understand that, and that's also because there's a
And that's what I'm saying. Like,
doctors.
and by the way, your expensive doctors and stuff for the most part, a lot of them are plastic surgeons, and that's still going to be there.
Well, there's
That's
super
elective
high paid
surgery.
specialists in just about every field,
Yeah,
but they're just not everywhere.
and when you're talking about, your brain surgeons and people like that, I mean, you're gonna, will they take a pay cut?
Well, you got to remember, even plastic surgeons have a very big role other than glamour. They
Right,
repair
for your
people's burns.
hands, and right.
They do all kinds of amazing things. They don't all just make somebody's nose, you know, the bridge of their nose skinnier or whatever.
For the most part,
It,
though, that's where they make their money is doing tits and lips and skin.
well, there are some high-paid plastic surgeons, but there are also some extremely high-paid of just every field. I mean, that's why they call it a specialist, and then you can go up the chain. And now you're at Johns Hopkins, you know, at their hospital, seeing some of the world's, you know, utmost specialists that are at the top of their field doing almost experimental or new things that you not only have to have the doctor for, but the technology and the research and the schools to do that kind of stuff. So there's a problem when, to me, as far as just the doctors. I know you can balance the books,
Yeah, but
but
I
when
mean,
it comes to all other fields of for the most part, outside of education, in any very basic capitalist society, do a bidding. And doctors go through a horrendous 12-year school. Okay, you got 4 years that, you got your master's, and now you go to your doctor's, right? So you're, from what I understand, if you want to balance the books, then you can't have bidding wars when you need doctors even more than you did before. So now we need 10 times the doctors, because a lot of people who never got treatment because they couldn't afford it can now say, I need help,
So
and rightfully so.
let me ask you a
But
question. Number one, um, if for one, in the plan, if college is paid for, you can so that cost is gone. Um, the doctor's insurance for like malpractice and stuff like that, that's taken care of. Where would
how is that taken care of?
that's part of the plan. Where would the doctors go? Why would they leave? Like, why would they stop being doctors? And do you think doctors are only doctors for the money? I mean, like, wouldn't a BA or somebody, like somebody who's in or MBNA, accountants, Wall
And as
Street,
being someone who
stock
has lived
day
with doctors,
day traders?
obviously their nightmare of their life and they do live horrible lives, especially anybody who's a general practitioner is going to be working 12-hour days minimum. So they do not have fun. So obviously there's a motivation, not just with financials. It has to be because they're interested in helping people.
So what I'm saying is,
But
so why would they
you
bring?
must have more than just that.
Yeah, I mean, they're still going to be some of the highest paid professionals. I mean, there's no like, top end like th-
Doctors are not the highest paid professionals in any way, shape, or form.
exactly.
Corporatists
No,
and yeah,
this is what I'm saying.
no, I'm just
So
saying
no,
we're not
your
even.
proposal that we're going to lose doctors because they won't be making a
No,
crap
no,
ton of
no.
money.
I'm saying there's not enough. I'm saying there's not enough doctors. Most people who've refused or haven't been able to afford treatment have been not getting it and dying. If you institute something where everyone has the ability to get treatment, then in other words, to not put people on giant waiting lists, we need more doctors. And the problem is, if you look at the amount of graduating doctors in the United States, it has been a slow decline for years and years and years.
Let me ask
We
you a quick
import more.
question.
We import doctors from over around the world.
Let me ask you a quick question. When you have your toilet, clogged up, do you just take a shit in it and continue to take a shit in it? Or do you say, fuck it,
I'm not
hold
sure
up,
if this
hold up,
metaphor is
hold up.
exactly what's going to work,
I'm getting
but
there.
if
I'm
my
getting there.
toilet's clogged up, I'm gonna try to,
Or do you get
I
your
have this.
hold on, or do you get your hands dirty and unclog it because after that, after some pretty nasty shit, it's going to be a smoother, easier system because the reason why we have such a backlog of people is because they weren't most of them. A majority of people who need procedures done is because they waited too long to go to the doctor because they couldn't afford it and it got too bad.
Right. There's the general checkup thing to get things earlier, and that's something that will take time to balance out. That won't just happen overnight.
And guess what though? Doing nothing at all and continuing our same system
No, no, no.
is just
You're not.
shitting in the
I'm not
clogged toilet.
disagreeing that it can work. I'm saying there's going to be, and first of all, I'm a little concerned about the malpractice thing because we all know how very sluggish and crappy just about any government system is in order to work through. And honestly, for me to expect that if the government takes control over the
Gooey
healthcare system, it's going to be any better than what it would be at an airport or something else.
compared to
I
insurance
just,
companies?
but
Compared to
insurance isn't
insurance
involved in
companies.
flight.
Come on.
I'm just saying government red tape everywhere. Just
No,
ask veterans who go through,
I
who
don't
who
need to ask
actually can see
I don't
specialists.
need to ask anyone about anything when I compare my issues, whether it be like let's say a credit card that has it's been stolen from me. This has happened to me multiple times, unfortunately, from online
Yeah, me too.
shopping. And I try to get my money back, and it takes an arm and a leg and 14 calls, and I'm on the phone for 30, and then they'll send me a note that says, "Well, we're gonna put the money back, but don't spend it because we got to see if this is
You
legitimate or
mean
not."
no? Now let me ask you. You mean your debit card? Because
Yeah, yeah.
a credit card wouldn't put the money back. It would just
Debit card.
I've had my credit card stolen, and it took a phone call. They called me and said there's some unusual activity. I found my card was gone, and then I even found out who did it. Now the police were like, "Oh, sorry. Even though he lives in town, we can't do anything about it." But the credit card company didn't even balk. They just
Yeah, no,
removed the
I'm
charges.
talking debit card and the credit card that the one instance this has happened to me about 15 times. If you own a business, it will
Good
happen a
God.
lot. Yeah, it does. It happens a lot. Because they see the name and they think that this company has a lot of money, so they can hack into them. It's not even like they took it out of my wallet. They hack into your account. And then, yeah, Facebook is where this happened to me a lot. Since I've
Oh,
deleted Facebook, haven't had a problem. But no, I mean it's a real pain in the ass. These companies don't want to lose the money, and they know that it's happening from somewhere overseas. Some third world countries hacked into stuff, and they're not going to get the money back. It's over. It's gone. They don't want to give it up. The insurance company, great example. My dad had to have a surgery, and oh, it's going to be paid for. No, no worries. Medicare's got it. Medicaid's got it. Turns out,
I tell you
no,
what, I
no, that
would be
didn't
game
happen.
for the whole thing to try it if they would make, you say make college free. Fuck that. I say make college free for professions that are in dire need. Doctors, go to medical school. If you can, you have to, you can't just be you can't get D's, but you have to, if you can be a good medical student, you can be a doctor for free. I would absolutely be for that. But I ain't paying for somebody to go through to be a social worker, which we have lots of social workers. We don't need more social workers. We need doctors. We need some of the most difficult positions
No, I think
to fill to take care of Americans.
we don't need is more, you know, we don't need more people who are working service industry jobs. That's what we don't need. And by putting a paywall behind advancement, that's what we're creating. Like
Well, I don't know
we need
about
to
social
create
work being much different than the service industry,
about
but
$40,000 a year compared to $15,000 a year. And
if you work full time in McDonald's at $15 an hour,
you
I
don't but
guarantee you make more than
you show me a
$15,000 a year.
McDonald's you make $15 an hour. I mean
Oh
that's the
well, they
whole
do, and
argument.
some not in Kansas.
No,
Wait, no, I thought McDonald's went with completely $15.
no, they're like 10.
Oh yeah, they're like 10 or
And
11 here. That's
by
right.
the way, the majority of the workers complained about it because well, I worked here already and I didn't make that kind of money. Anytime there's any sort of these things happen, people complain because I didn't get mine. I had to work hard for. Shut up. We have to raise the standard. We have to raise the standard universally throughout this entire country. Or do you want us living in the 70s and 80s forever? We have to
I'm
do all that,
and,
and it's
and
you know
in
it's
in a
gonna
in a
suck.
country where everybody loves everybody, people would need those reasons and incentives to become doctors and suffer through all that school. They want some payback. Just and I don't blame them. And they don't. I don't think most of them, especially like I said, general
But
practitioners,
again, we're
don't.
not talking about. I'm not talking. And even in the plan that I've seen, like doctors are still making the same amount of money on average. Maybe you don't have like you're really super. I don't know. I can't answer that. I haven't looked close enough in. But in the
Well,
plan,
here's my question. I understand why you would want malpractice, but let me. Have you ever tried to say sue a police department or put in a formal complaint for and I am saying that it's the life and death in some scenarios. They're wielding guns, the one's wielding a scalpel, and the problem and the difference would be, in California, even beat cops, the price of living is much higher, but they'll make a couple hundred grand, by the way, just like beat cops in San Francisco and places. But and that's absolutely true. You can go look at all their salaries. But if there are doctors who are actually doing wrong and hurting people, how do you get justice in that system? Just like say that if there were any unintentional or intentional sterilizations at the border, how do you go through that government mess to get answers? It's not going to happen. And when you talk about lawyers and
again,
malpractice,
our
people
current
settle
system
all the
doesn't
time.
work.
Doctors and hospitals settle.
And that's exact. You'll end up with the exact same thing. I mean, just like citizens and police op and police state. the police settle all the time too.
No, they don't.
They
In
do.
fact, the police, any kind of formal complaint that goes through a police department, first of all, they do. We investigated ourselves and we found nothing wrong. Do you know how hard it is to even get a judge to to charge a police officer with even the most basic offenses? It's because they have qualified immunity. It is the
But
most difficult thing
again,
in the
no, no, here's the
world.
question though. But doctors don't. And and let
That's
me
right.
and let me
But
put
they're
it
also
and
not government
let
officials
me
at
also
this
put it this
time.
way too. You don't have, I mean, for instance, like you were talking, you gave an example that doesn't apply to citizens and definitely should be dealt with and is basically covered by the CPB, not medical industry, but the sterilization of people at the border. Completely different. Like, you wouldn't have a doctor who does that. I don't know a single person in the medical field who would say, who would hurt somebody and then go, oh crap, I did do that, but I'm not going to own up to it. They're all there.
Oh,
They're all
do
there
you know that
to
some of the
lose,
things that doctors accidentally do ruin their entire careers?
right?
So
And they do, and
even
it
if they own
happens.
up to it, do you think they would ruin their career for one mistake? I'm not saying that. We're not talking about somebody who's. We're talking about habitual people, not just one doctor who made a mistake. But I'm saying, you know, for instance, here's an example in your favor. A friend of mine, his father had a heart attack. They airlifted him to a hospital. The hospital said, "Hey, we don't have any emergency rooms ready. We can't treat him. We need more time. You need to take him to this other hospital." They fly him to another hospital. 20, 30 minutes later, he gets there and he dies. And he only died because the hospital that they flew him to begin with denied service, not for insurance reasons, just because they said they didn't have a room ready. Well, guess what? They did. They did have rooms ready. They just didn't want to mess with it. And so they killed his father. And I'm pretty sure his mother settled. They were already rich,
Who,
but his mother settled.
who? But
How do
my
you
point.
how do you
Here's my
prove
point
that?
though.
How do you recourse that
Who
now?
fought that? Who fought that for the the patient? Was it the
Well,
insurance
the
company?
insurance company
No.
is able to
In fact,
their insurance company.
the insurance company doesn't want to admit fault either because they
No,
want to
no, but
keep
this
their
is
money.
two insurance companies
Yeah.
at war now. You have the hospital's insurance company telling this is a civil suit with a lawyer and
No,
their
no, no,
medical
no, no.
personnel.
That's the key right there. Because see, in your theory or your thing here, you're taking out legislator. You're taking out lawyers. 'Cause you can still get a lawyer and sue.
Right. But people get lawyers all the time and try to get when their
The
rights are violated
insurance
horribly.
company doesn't help this process at all.
But my company,
The insurance company does not help this process at all because, like, their insurance company, the malpractice insurance, they don't want to admit fault either. They're going to hold on to their money just as much as anyone else, and they're going to fight any sort of
that's right.
malpractice. So
But
by
most of the time
taking,
when it's open, when you have a civil suit, they weigh the balance of how much it's going to cost to fight the suit, how much evidence there is, and especially when a jury in a
of
civil
course,
suit.
and if
Right.
you
So
did that like
the
like
insurance
that,
company usually pays out. Now try doing it where you're basically in the same scenario as trying to sue the cops.
no, it's not.
Now you've got a
Completely
government
different.
official, a government
Completely
judge,
different. And
a
also,
government representative who
look at
investigated themselves and found nothing wrong. I'm telling you, it's going to be 10 times harder to get justice for people medically at that point because it's going to go right into the red tape system of government sludge. And it doesn't matter if you have a great lawyer. It's going to be. I'm just saying there's
well,
lots of roadblocks
let's look at
to getting
like
to that spot.
just quickly here. Number one, this already happens with the VA, and there's no
Yes,
real malpractice problems in the VA. It's for like nothing on major. In fact, most people prefer the VA. Now, Medicare, Medicaid, these are the most popular healthcare platforms. Where's that? Where's your protection there? My point is, and then here's the big one. You might have
But
what?
Medicare pays out to private doctors, and so does the VA. They pay out if you're lucky enough to get them to pay for a specialist somewhere else.
A lot of times they don't do that. Point is, and here's the big one. Maybe what 8 to 10% of all people that go to the hospital might have to deal with this issue, right? And that's a big number, by the way. That's a huge, huge number. But that's still a lot smaller than the 120 million Americans who don't go to the hospital now. So what you're saying is you're throwing up a giant hurdle and saying this is the bigger problem. Meanwhile, there is a roadblock in front of that hurdle that dwarfs your hurdle. The amount of people that aren't able to get medical attention in this country is astronomical compared to this one little problem. And
Oh yeah,
you know
well
what? And you
I'm
can
not.
quote
I
here.
did focus in on one problem for sure, and I'm not saying that's a small problem. I'm just saying I think there's. I think first and foremost we don't have enough doctors, and you have to start with that, because you can't implement something that can't be serviced. It's like you give everybody a car, but there's only so many mechanics.
Again, but
People
again,
are going to.
like we were saying though, the only way to actually fix that problem is to start working on it and to start getting people attention now, so we can
And to
so
start
we can.
getting people to become auto mechanics. And they're
I'm more
and
for
how the market fixes that is that auto mechanics salaries go up, the demand goes up, and people start going to school for it more often because they know they can get a higher salary. When you throw the government in there as the only
but
servicer
it's not
for
happening.
that,
We've been on this system for forever,
no,
and it's not
right. I'm
happening.
not saying
That's
that
the
the other
point.
part of the system is perfect either.
It's not working. That's the whole point. I mean, and I think that's the main point, is it's not working now. And in fact, I mean, if you could look at all the major flaws we have, and then compare that to the fact that every 2 years our healthcare system is evaluated against the rest of the first world countries, and we always land at 11 out of 11. And by the way, we're the only one that doesn't have a single payer healthcare system.
Yeah, well, and I do know that list has very specific rating standards. They're not rating for availability of newest programs and availability of this and that, because there
No,
are
because it's
things that we are
universal.
number
It's
one on
universal. Because here's the thing.
on that list
No,
for.
because here's the thing. Like, if you needed some sort of special treatment, you needed some kind of cancer treatment, you are fucked. If you were rich,
Oh yeah,
you got it. So no, this is a universal, the health of the entire country. The health of the entire
that's where
country,
TikTok's going to come in, and my videos are going to make me some money.
the health of the entire country is not the health of one. And that's why we're 11 out of 11. The
Yeah,
age,
no,
you know,
the list that you're talking about, the ratings list, I do think those things are important, but at the same time, there are some other important things that aren't on that list that we're on the top of. You just have to be rich to access them.
exactly. Which, by the way, we're not rich. Our listeners aren't rich. Anyone I care about isn't rich, so I don't care about those things. I care about the
And if
things that are
anybody
gonna
is
help.
rich and wants to make Jay and me rich, man, we're ready.
It's not gonna happen. But that's the thing. My community is not rich. I don't care about what can benefit the rich, and I wouldn't use
No,
that as a factor in deciding a healthcare system and what could
no,
help.
I'm not using it as a factor. I'm using it as as an example of capitalist incentive that the development and the technology process does have an important role to play. And I don't know how you do that when you take out a lot of the monetary, influence in some of the fields. It doesn't matter. This is. I'm not saying that right itself is not doing universal health care is going to take away all of the incentive for people to be doctors. I'm just saying there are going to be people who can finally access some health care, but we still have to have more doctors. I mean, the numbers are
No,
very
that's
evident.
we definitely are. It's just the whole the in the financial behind it as well. Like we would actually it's basically in over 10 years it would actually have the same effect on our system that legalizing marijuana did, where it'll actually start to actually make money for people, for our government as a whole. Like, that's how much money is soaked out through the insurance companies. Like,
Oh
hospitals will
well,
actually start to make money. And
right,
what
right.
they do with that
And but
money,
that's
they
just like
decide.
saying if we could cut out all the government waste. I'll use this as an example of not of the medical problem, but in the year 2000, right before 9/11, in fact, the day before the planes flew into the building, there were congressional hearings on how much money that the U.S. government and, quote, kind of the U.S. military could not account for.
Oh, yeah,
We
yeah.
like, in other words, we've lost this. And Rumsfeld first came up with a couple small numbers, and then if you can look this up, it's on YouTube. The day before 9/11, he said we cannot account for over $2 trillion in military and government spending.
Right, right.
And then right after 9/11, when all the military started to get their, I wouldn't say the military, let's say the military industrial complex started to receive big old bucks. Dick Cheney and his, concrete death buildings he was building over there, and you name it. All of a sudden, they came back and said, "Never mind. We found the paper that says that we didn't lose anything." But that wasn't the case because just recently they've come and said, "Well, now we can't
What,
account for like
6 trillion?
over, yeah,
Yeah.
$6 to $7 trillion in unaccounted for money." And I'm just like, wow, that is some great fucking accounting.
Well,
That is,
there again, though, that's not government waste.
oh, well, it's money that you don't know where it went and what it was spent for, and you will never know because it was intended to disappear. So if our government
Well,
is
I mean, I
in
can tell
other
you,
governments, I'm sure,
I
if
can tell
they're
you where
that,
if they broke it, if they hacked into private companies like Raytheon and Boeing, they'd probably find all the
well,
money there.
sure. Well, I mean, we know, look, we know where the money went. It's called, can we hold them to account for black projects?
Right.
In other words, not just the development of some new jet or something like that. There are black projects, and this is not conspiracy, by the way. This is how it's worked. This is how development and but you still have to. There is a lot of government waste, and if you have any military friends, they'll tell you all kinds of stories about supply stuff. And people are just, in any job in military is a job. Sometimes you just don't give a shit about stuff. But that tends to add up because it's not just a low level sergeant, not caring about, how much supplies that he gives out or whatever, take what you want. We're all the same people, but this goes up the chain to the point where people are, projects that never come to fruition or waste money or this or that start to add up to trillions of dollars, and there's no accountability for it. And I'm just a cynic when it comes to you telling me that it can all work. Yeah, there's money there for that. There's money out there floating around that disappears that we don't even know where it goes to. And you expect me to think that we're going to be able to budget and answer the American people correctly and give them the medical services that they deserve when we're this horrible with money?
But there again, um, universally, you talk like again, you're going military, which military it's not. That's not government ran really. That's ran by private industry. It's
Oh,
ran by the
well,
deep state.
the government doles out that money
To
to people,
private
like you said,
industry,
to private industry. And
who, by the way, then pays the government and pays the politicians to dole out money to them. So
right.
you have that's capitalism, buddy. That's capitalism working.
Well, what
Then
I'm
you've
saying
got
is,
no, hold on,
even if the medical industry falls under the veil
hold
of
up.
government
Let's talk about the
and services,
let's talk about the most.
I just don't. I don't see that changing.
Here's the like government ran most profitable, and I would say arguably one of the best systems we have And it was until the government until uh, they wanted to privatize it. When when they wanted to privatize it, they fucked over the postal system. Until then, up until that point, they were doing great. The postal system was doing great, but they got defunded by the Bush administration because they wanted to privatize it. They wanted to give it to big businesses. You can look this up. It's totally true.
No, no, it's true.
And how did that work? Simple government ran. It was done the right way. Didn't have lobbyists. Didn't have any sort of big corporations taking in money. No, nothing. It was just doing its job. And when you compare that to, let's say, this with the deep state and the military industrial complex, which is definitely engined and powered by big corporations and capitalism, that's when you have all the problems. That's all I'm saying.
Well,
And here's my other thing. Here's my last point. That the healthcare system we currently have mirrors the deep state problems than it does the postal service, than it does these other simpler things. We're talking less swamp, less corruption, because there's less money to exchange, less hands for money to exchange through. And that's what I'm saying. Like clearing a lot and untangling it, because the fact of the matter is, and like I bring it up before, I'll bring it up again. The system we have doesn't work. And
yeah, it does not work for everybody. It doesn't work for you and me for sure.
I don't hear anyone else bringing up a different idea. And when I do, I'll look at it, I'll think about it, I'll analyze it. But until then, Medicare for All has been the best I've heard. Outside of that, I've heard Trump's "we're going to give everybody to everything to everyone," which was a great plan. He still probably doesn't have a plan. Joe Biden's "let's just keep going with Obamacare." Yeah, because that's worked great. Nobody else. And by the way, Tucker Carlson, let's hear your plan. Let's hear fucking Rachel Maddow's plan. All these people who want to bash it, let's hear their plan. They don't have one. It's like my dad told me when I was young. He said, "Son, it takes a great man to build a barn. It takes one jackass to kick it down." And that's the way I look at a lot of people in this situation, whether it be Trump or Biden or any of them who just attack Medicare for all. Well, they don't have shit. So they're great at attacking it, but not good at building up anything. And that's, again, I don't hear any, who is it? Chris Matthews, who called Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All plan. He said it's like the Nazis invading France. He said
Oh,
that.
Chris Matthews is a retard.
Complete scumbag. Like, I don't see his Medicare plan. I don't see his plan to fix the country. He doesn't have shit.
Well, and I would love to see an actual comprehensive plan. I almost think it's so complex. It's like digging out the military industrial complex. How do you do that? I don't know.
I don't think you can. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, it is our military, I think.
no, in a lot of ways it is, and I agree that there's. If you think about the amount of money that exchanges hands for medical services, it may be just as much.
I mean, it's the difference being in the major differences is you have less enemies. You have less obstacles. You basically just have the insurance company. You take them out, and then that's it. As
It almost comes down to asking that 0.1% of people to stop being assholes.
right. No, exactly. No, that's huge. No, that's true. And by the way, I mean like 51% of Republicans support it. 82% of Democrats support it. This bill would pass without a doubt. Um, and to loop it back around for about an hour ago when we started this, you asked me would people take a loss to help another country, and I think on principle and on paper, if they knew the reality of it, like if they weren't sold a bunch of crap on CNN or Fox or any of their news outlets, if they literally just saw the actual plan, just like Medicare for All, they actually saw the plan, sat down, actually read through it, not let someone else read through it and tell them the talking points, but they actually read it. I think they would
You
go,
know,
Yeah,
I, I, I just
I
had
would do
I just
this.
had an idea, kind of what you were talking about, and how you could sell that to the American people. And I have not heard this from anyone, but I was thinking back to the moon program, the Apollo program, and how Kennedy was just like,
Yeah,
you know,
we'll never go to
by
the
the
moon.
end of and I love how he says decade. By the end of the decade, we will put a man on. Okay, it would almost be something if you wanted to. It would be awesome to partner with Taiwan or another country to do something amazing. Like we're going to partner with Taiwan to bring some of the highest in medical services and this and this. We're going to engage in this huge, basically saying we're going to land the man on the moon medically, and we're going to do it as a partnership with this other great nation that is underappreciated and has the technology and the production, and we both share a lot of the scientists, and we're going to make this happen. And when we make it happen, we're going to share it with the rest of the world. And seriously, that would be so awesome to engage in, kind of like in a sense, something as difficult and as amazing as moon mission stuff. Like we're not only going to cure cancer, we're going to do all of these things, and we're going to put all this effort into it, and we will reap the benefits, and so will the rest of the world. Can you imagine the pressure on China to stay the f out of the of screwing up something like that? If you
Well, yeah,
openly
if
engage.
you did something like that, sure. I mean, but I even think that if people actually saw a thing, like you were saying, it would cost them $400 a month or $400 a year. Sorry. I think they would. I think they would do it until Tucker Carlson or Rachel Maddow or somebody like that got a hold of it and said, "Look what look what this
Yeah, they're
plan,
just
look what
stealing your money.
yeah,
Even if you told them it would take you, we won't see results of any form for 10 or 15 years, assuming nothing changes with the Chinese government, blah, blah, blah. It's going to take some time to pressure. But what they
right,
need to tell people is the Chinese government is extremely patient. And so we're asking you to be extremely patient with this. And there you have one of the biggest problems is 4-year administrations. And not
well,
that
and
that's
oh
not a
yeah.
bad thing,
By the way,
but you
too,
see what I'm saying.
I also think if you told people, like, I don't think the $400 would hurt a lot of people. Like, it would hurt, but I don't think that would be the breaking point. I'll tell you what it would be. It would be, oh, and by the way, your like Amazon Prime crap, that's gone. That I think would be the thing that would people go, wait, I can't pay
Well, and
over
that's
above.
probably going to happen anyway with the Postal Service. But maybe you could give them an incentive otherwise and say, but here's what we're going to do in the same time frame. The government is going to take over internet, and you are no longer going to pay $80 and $90, $100 a month for your crap internet speeds. We are going to put an infrastructure in this nation to give everyone, gigabit Ethernet, no matter,
Right.
just about where you are. If you're 20 miles from from even a small city, we're going to get it to you, and you're going to pay $10 or $15 a month. That's all it's going to cost you.
By the way,
And and
in
and and at the same time, you say that will save you more than the $400 a month,
yeah, oh yeah, $400 a year.
and that's an
But even
internal
even
service.
400 a
So if you
month
can
would
make
be too
an
much.
internal service that saves them that much money, then to say that externally their goods and services from these other countries that we're kind of putting the kibosh on are going to cost more, I think you'd totally get to go for it.
See, all of your ideas though are left-wing ideas, like far left. I hope you know that.
Well, I've always
You're
been for
further
the internet becoming
you're further
is a
left than you
is like your
think.
water bill.
You are further left than you think. But no, I mean, I
You
think
shut up. I'm going to go buy some guns right now just because you said that, asshole.
with American flags on them. No, but interesting. Before we go, um, Ajit Pai is going to resign. So that net neutrality thing we get to say goodbye to, so that might be cool. I know me personally, like my family, will probably be able to stop paying unlimited data to Cox. That would be nice, because that's an extra $50 a month that we've been paying since net neutrality kicked in.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much wrong with. If you want to tell me I'm left on that, that's fine. If you understand how the telecom companies and the cable companies are lying to you about why they charge this and that,
Yeah.
it's on a technological standpoint. They are lying to your face, telling you that, oh, well, we have to throttle down or there's a data cap. BS,
Right.
absolute BS.
Well,
So each
hopefully,
node they have,
whoever.
they say that you use that much because they can't, that they have to improve their own infrastructure. I guarantee you, every network node and repeater that they have is more than capable of doing unlimited data to every single person around here.
I hope whoever Biden puts in, I hope they abolish net neutrality. Like that would be honestly, that would almost pay for it for the whole thing. Because I mean, on a personal
You
level,
mean reinstate it, or I thought it was gone?
right? Yes, I guess I should say abolish Ajit Pai's. I don't know if it's a bill or if it's just an
Yeah,
order.
they
I don't know
killed net
what he.
neutrality, is what they did. The
Right.
FCC.
I don't know. I don't know how he did it though. I don't know if it was an order or what. But whatever. Basically, yeah, reinstate net neutrality, I guess. I didn't know that it was a previous bill in play. I basically undo Ajit Pai's crap. That
Right.
like that would be basically, yeah. I think honestly that would pay for the whole 4 years of Biden for me. Again, on a personal note, but that's only because that's
No,
been my.
no, he better do pot too.
Well, yeah. Well, in private prisons, for me, private prisons is a big one because
Yeah.
that was the moment when he said that. I was like, all right, I'm gonna vote for you. But that's only because of the whole private prison thing. I still ended up not voting for him because I didn't trust him, but I would have. Like in 2024, if they abolish private prisons, then they might get my vote. But I don't think they will. I highly doubt it. Anyway, we gotta go. Thanks a lot. We will be back probably Friday. Anyway, until then, hopefully nothing major happens in the news, or maybe, hopefully something does, and we'll have something more to talk about. Outside of that, we will be trying to stream. On the next show, we might have some more information. It might be, maybe next week we'll actually be able to give more information about where to hear or watch us or join us on some streaming service or something. I don't. We really haven't ironed anything out, is what I'm saying. But we do want to take the show to the Twitch platform and
Yeah, we're aware of this thing called streaming,
right.
and
We
maybe
both
we
play
should try
video
it.
games, so yeah, it makes sense. We want to give that a shot. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening, guys. Take care.